What if I told you that Ferrari could have doomed its future by a desperate gamble that is already showing signs of failing? What happened to the secret Maranello project? And why is the 2026 regulation leaving them with no escape? Stay, because this is not an exaggeration. It is a bomb that has already exploded inside the paddock. Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. To understand the crisis that Ferrari is experiencing today, you must first go back to the middle of the 2025 season. At that time, the Italian team made a decision that seemed bold, almost visionary: interrupt the development of the SF25, its current single-seater, to pour all the technical, human, and financial resources into Project 678, the car destined to compete under the new regulations of 2026. This decision was not impulsive. It was planned internally as a long-term strategy, designed with the hope that Ferrari would once again set the standard for innovation, as in its golden years. But as so many times in the recent history of the Scuderia, theory has not coincided with practice. At the time this decision was made, Ferrari was still fighting for podiums. Leclerc and Hamilton were showing flashes of speed, and although victories were elusive against a revitalized McLaren and a rising Mercedes, the team had a case to remain competitive in the short term. However, Vasseur and his technical team believed that the true objective had to be beyond the immediate horizon. 2026 was the key year, the great technical revolution, the moment to rebuild the lost hegemony. That's why updates were frozen, simulator hours were cut for the current car, and key engineers were reassigned to the future development department. But that strategy, which sounded logical on paper, had an essential problem. It left Ferrari vulnerable in the present. And that's exactly what happened. The second half of the championship was a quiet disaster. Mediocre results, failures in data correlation between track and simulator, and a total loss of confidence in the car. The SF25 became an unpredictable, inconsistent car that neither Hamilton nor Leclerc could understand on crucial weekends. The alarm bells were already going on before the data on the new car was revealed, but everyone within the team ignored them. It was believed that the momentary sacrifice would be worth it. What no one anticipated, or what many did not dare to admit, was that by stopping evolving the current car, Ferrari also lost contact with the technical reality of the grid. While McLaren improved every detail of its MCL39 and Mercedes perfected the balance of the W15, Ferrari was trapped in a kind of theoretical bubble where the simulation said one thing, but the track said a very different thing. And the worst thing is that this disconnection also affected its technical validation process for 2026. The wind tunnel, the engine bench tests, the CFD simulations, everything was developed without a solid comparative basis from the real track. In other words, Ferrari jumped into the void with no safety net, blindly trusting that its leap would be enough to fly above the competition in 2026. What we know today is that not only are they not flying, they are falling fast. With this maneuver, Ferrari intended to be the first to adapt to the coming technical revolution. But what he achieved was to renounce the present without guaranteeing the future. And that, in Formula One, is the most costly mistake that a team can make. Because this sport does not forgive, the Project 678 is not just any car. It is the pillar on which Ferrari intends to sustain its entire competitive identity in the new era that will begin in 2026. It is not just a car. It is the culmination of a total commitment to reinvent itself under a regulation that changes almost everything: aerodynamic architecture, proportion of hybrid energy, thermal management, and above all, the balance between combustion engine and electric unit. That's why it hurts so much that, at this point, it's already at risk. According to multiple technical leaks, the first test bench results for the new power unit have set off all the alarms. The most sensitive information points to a deficit of approximately 30 horsepower compared to the preliminary Mercedes model. Under normal conditions, that figure is already worrying. But in the context of 2026, where 50% of the total performance of the car will depend on the electrical part, that difference may be insurmountable. This is not a minor detail. The new regulations will reduce the amount of fuel allowed per race, forcing teams to extract much more performance from the hybrid system. The new MGUK system will have a power close to 350 kilowatts, which represents a monumental leap compared to the current generation. This means that energy efficiency, braking recovery, and thermal management will be as important as the power of the combustion engine. And that's where Ferrari is failing. Dynamometer bench tests not only reflect lower power, they reflect chronic inefficiency in energy conversion and serious problems in the reliability of the hybrid unit. Overheating, losses in the recovery of the kinetic system, and a power delivery curve that does not align with the initial simulations are reported. Simply put, what the computer said would work is not working in the real world. And this is more than a technical problem, it is a crisis of confidence. Maranello engineers, some of them recently hired from Renault, have begun to publicly question the architecture of the new engine within the team. There are even those who negatively compare its performance with respect to developments that Renault had already ruled out before closing its F1 program. It is a devastating psychological blow for a team that sought to lead technological change. Furthermore, the problems are not limited to the engine. The aerodynamic simulations of the car also present inconsistencies. The aerodynamic package designed around the new regulations is believed to be generating too much drag at high speed without offering effective downforce in mid-corners. This not only compromises top speed, it directly affects energy efficiency, since a car with greater air resistance needs more power to keep up, which goes against everything that 2026 demands. Worse still, Ferrari is running out of room to react. Although the regulations come into force within a year, the approval and production deadlines are already running. Any major redesign of the engine or chassis could compromise delivery times. And in modern Formula One, arriving late to the regulations is not a minor disadvantage. It is a sentence of competitive irrelevance. Project 678 was to be Ferrari's glorious return, the masterpiece that consolidated its resurgence after years of errors and frustrations. But the reality today is that it is floundering before even touching the track. What was emerging as the beginning of a new era now threatens to become the beginning of another dark cycle. At Ferrari, the power unit is not simply a technical part of the car. It's a question of identity. The engine is part of the Scuderia's DNA. Since its inception, the Maranello roar has been a symbol of pride, speed, and tradition. Therefore, admitting that they are at a technical disadvantage is not only a competitive setback, it is an emotional wound within the organization. And that wound is open today and bleeding. The most recent reports circulating among engineers, paddock analysts, and specialized media agree on one key word: concern. Not only because the IC internal combustion engine is far from its efficiency goals, but because the electrical systems designed to complement that deficit are generating more problems than solutions. The implementation of the new 350 kilowatts MGUK, which should have been a technological leap, is presenting a series of difficulties that Maranello cannot resolve. The energy recovery system is not only unstable, but also compromises the overall reliability of the powertrain. During bench testing, there have been incomplete regeneration cycles, unexpected power losses, and overheating that forced multiple sessions to stop. In an environment where energy efficiency will be at the core of competitive performance, Ferrari is facing a perfect storm. But the problem does not end with the hardware. The real crisis is within the technical team. The 2026 technical calendar is already underway. The dates for preliminary tests are marked. The parts must be ready for validation before mid-year, and hybrid systems must pass the final homologation phases before the season ends. At this point, any lingering misconceptions, any undetected design flaws, risk being dragged onto the runway where there is no longer room to hide them. Ferrari is literally fighting its own internal clock. Because while Mercedes and Red Bull begin to stabilize their prototypes, and McLaren refines its technical concept with quiet confidence, in Maranello work is being done on multiple fronts at once. The problem is that this fragmentation of the effort can lead to incomplete solutions, temporary patches, or what is worse, structural errors that only become evident when it is too late. Ferrari, on the other hand, advances in the dark. With every step he takes, he wonders if it is the right one. And if it is not, there will be no turning back. Because the problem is not just the clock. The thing is, the clock is ticking, and Ferrari doesn't know if it's racing toward victory or toward another monumental failure. Ferrari bet everything on 2026. It abandoned the present, sacrificed points, ignored media pressure, and suspended its own redemption narrative with a single objective: to lead the new era. But what was a strategic jump is becoming a free fall without a parachute. Project 678 was born as the promise of a renaissance, the symbol of a modern, aggressive Ferrari, ready to reconquer the top. But today, that promise is faltering. What was projected as a masterful chess move now looks more like a desperate move in a game that already threatens to be lost. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.